Hello, ladies and gentlemen and others. I am Ian.
I am Steve.
We are developing the Downbelow RPG, and today we are continuing our new developer discussion series in
This
a
is
slightly shorter format
Part 3 of 5.
of the current series of discussions. And today we're going to talk about what success and failure get you, because we mentioned previously that they don't always get you the same things. So sometimes this is a back and forth between players and GM. Sometimes, and if you have run any RPGs, you will know this, players want to do things that the GM thinks are dumb.
This is, well, honestly, this is agency at work. Under no circumstances should you say, no, you can't do that, unless it's literally something impossible. If a player says, I'm going to flap my arms so hard I fly to the moon, it's entirely okay to say, no, you can't do that.
Most of the time it will be the players choosing a direction that you think is really not the story that you thought was going on here, such as it's a tense negotiation scene over the payment for a certain job, and one of the players is like, I'm going to pull out my gun and shoot the guy because I don't like his face.
This can totally lead to a great story, but it's a very stupid decision.
This is where you as the GM get to make some decisions. So, first, let's talk about success.
Success comes in a couple of flavors. First off, every player character has 10, or if you count stuff, 11 possible successes that they can use at any given moment without recharging in a game.
And that's if you haven't allowed them to advance.
Any trait can be used in any situation to generate a success if you negotiate it with the GM.
That's the footnote, because negotiation with the GM is really important here, and any trait can theoretically be used to create a success, but the situation is very important, and your dancing skill just isn't going to get you out of every situation.
Exactly. So let's look at the various scales of success. There's really 2 levels, possibly 3 if you go that far, but there's 2 functional levels of what is a success.
The primary level, which you will see most often, and which is going to be most important in our next discussion, which is structuring your scenes and planning for the successes and failures, is the appropriate success. You have used an appropriate trait. The GM and the player agree that, yes, this is what you need to succeed in this situation. You are trying to evade traffic and get to a location in a specified time frame. Driving is the correct skill for the job.
Every so often, there will be a situation where there's literally the perfect match. You'll be in the middle of not only a negotiation, but a hostage negotiation with the Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, and someone will say, wow, I literally have 10 years of hostage negotiation success with Greater Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. That might count double.
No, I'm going to say no. There's no double.
Okay.
There is only appropriate. This is actually very important, because most of the time you shouldn't be having players with overly specific traits, although 10 years of experience at a job can often be stretched to cover a big range of possible success conditions. But if you have a trait that's a no-brainer, like was just described, that just means it's a no-brainer for the appropriate slot.
Yep.
The other kind of success is the, well, you can do that, but it might not be the best choice.
My goal is to end negotiations quickly. To do that, I'm going to pull out a gun and threaten or assassinate my negotiating partner.
And this would possibly, in the GM's opinion, turn the scene from a negotiation into a fight scene, and instead of having to get a couple of back-and-forth successes negotiating your way through the objections of the other side, now you have to get a success for each goon you want to put down from their bodyguards.
Or even if it does not actually change the amount of successes required, and we'll get to that construction next session, at minimum, an inappropriate success automatically raises or changes the stakes at hand for failure.
Yeah, there's basically three things that an inappropriate success will get you. One, it can actually count for less and thus make you need to use more successes to succeed. Two, it can count as a failure as well as a success, advancing the you are failing at this scene track as well as the you are succeeding at this scene track. We'll talk about that in the constructing a scene.
Right.
And three, it can raise the stakes. It can make things more dangerous. Instead of potentially losing money like you originally were in the negotiation, now you might get killed.
As a side effect, since we are being very sparing to the point of forbidding it with double successes, a success requiring you to add another success to this scene is probably not a smart thing. On the other hand, requiring another success in a later scene or depleting a resource like an NPC's tolerance of you is perfectly reasonable.
We'll talk about what to do with the more successes required thing later in the scene construction. For now, let's move on to the failure side of things.
Yep.
Because failures are a beast that you manage very differently in this game than in most games. In most games, failures happen when they happen, and the players are forced to accept them. In this game, the failures are things players are supposed to choose. Why would they ever do that?
The main difference is that in most games, a failure means that things stop. Best case scenario, do it again, stupid. Worst case scenario, oop, sorry, you failed, this avenue is closed. Here, failures propel the story forward as much as successes, just in a different light.
So we'll talk about the failures towards certain scene ending in the next episode, but for now, just know that there will be such a track, and that is what distinguishes the levels of failures. The basic failure is it's not so bad right now, but things are looking towards a certain ending.
There are no immediate consequences to a simple failure, but it will mean that the scene resolves usually against the protagonist's favor.
However, there are levels of consequences, and the basic catch-all for the other kind of failure is immediate consequences.
Yep.
Immediate consequences might not seem immediate. They might seem like they're long-term because it's Mr. Chu now has a bad opinion of you. But that has happened because of this one failure as opposed to as the result of the scene.
Yeah.
It can also be you immediately suffer a bad effect. If you get your hand cut off by the local Vori as a lesson for stealing from them, then that is a significant failure.
There are times, and this is something to be very blunt and very upfront about, when the stakes are high enough, a failure can permanently or sometimes temporarily remove a trait from a character's sheet. Period.
They can even change that character sheet in ways that you normally don't have things on a character sheet, such as it is always a challenge for the character to accomplish XYZ because of this consequence of failure.
Right.
If you're missing a hand, that might not make you lose a specific trait. It might just make anything that requires two hands a challenge for you.
Yeah. Tying your shoes now actually requires a success.
Unless another character is there to do it for you.
Yeah.
If you're alone, uh-oh. So, the final thing to note is that character elimination could be on the table.
If the
whether
stakes
it's
rise high enough.
Player or non-player character who is important to the players, having a character killed could be a result. And this, as we mentioned in the first of these discussions, everything should be on the table between the GM and players. The players should know, if the scene goes this direction, then death is on the table. This is a gunfight. Your characters could die. Now, not every gunfight means that the player characters are necessarily going to die, but the players should be informed if this gunfight is serious, your characters could die.
We mentioned earlier that the negotiation with the GM was a crucial part of the setup. There is a gray area sometimes between a really bad success and a simple failure. Really inappropriate success and a simple failure. This should come out during the negotiation. If someone says, I want to use this trait to succeed, and the GM really doesn't think it's appropriate, the GM should offer, how about instead of using that trait to succeed, you refresh a different trait by failing in that manner.
Because sometimes the player's course of action, that they can choose that course of action, and their character might even do the thing the player wanted them to accomplish, but the GM explains how that would count as a failure, and here are the consequences that will result from successfully shooting that guy in the face.
Finally, because we're really almost out of time, this is something that will become important. Not every back and forth needs to be a success challenge. Sometimes people are just bantering, talking, investigating, and occasionally, if you can engage an NPC in conversation, for instance, and he'll let slip where the secret rebel base is, that's not going to count as a success against you, that's just talking. Similarly, if you're firing the gun wildly into the air to warn pedestrians that there's a gunfight coming through, that's just common sense.
Or maybe it is a success. We'll talk about planning for that and using it in play next time.